Chapter 241. The shipwright seagulls cried as they rose into the sky, and ahead the white waves and sandy beaches came into view. Mythland, the Grey Havens, stood at the mouth of the Shuan River in Shuan Bay. It had stood for over 6,000 years. Its lord was Círdan the Shipwright, an elf whose birth was suspected to date back to the years of the Two Trees, older than any other elf now in Middle-earth. He was so ancient that, though an elf, he looked like an old man. When an immortal's hair silvered and a beard grew gray, it spoke of truly vast age, the withering of the Two Trees, the great war between Morgoth and the Valar, the sinking of the Western lands, the rise and fall of Sauron, the war of the Last Alliance, and even everything Liyue had done lately. Welcome, the new legend Liyue. When Liyue reached the gates of the Grey Havens, Círdan came out to greet him. The elf was very tall, beard long and white, yet his eyes were clear and keen. He bowed slightly. "It is an honor that you have come. I have been expecting you." "I was delayed by other matters these past years and have only recently found the time," Liyue replied. He dismounted, returned the bow, and handed the reins to an elf who had come with Círdan to receive him. "He will be well cared for." "It's nothing." Círdan clasped Liyue's hand. Though he appeared old, his posture was steady and sure, and the muscles under his garments suggested great strength, not unlike Sengil's in outline. He was extraordinary. At least 2 meters tall, Círdan's height forced Liyue to look upward. If such a being charged into a mass of orcs with a greatsword, he imagined, the swing would send many of them flying. "This is no place for conversation," Círdan said. "Come into the hall and rest." "That would be best." They walked along the stone-paved streets into the city. Birch and poplar were planted throughout the town. As autumn advanced, the poplars gleamed gold along the roads. Grey Havens had its own quiet beauty. The lord and guardian of the harbor, Círdan the Shipwright, walked among it with Liyue the wall builder, taking in the view. When they reached the docks, Círdan's eyes traveled west, full of longing. "To be swept away by kin makes it hard to remain behind," he said. "Valinor holds all that I love. My yearning for it is sharp, yet I do not go. I am bound by the Valar. I must remain until the last of the elves sails." He sighed. "I have lingered on these mortal shores so long, and I cannot yet see the end of my task." Now, Liyue looked at him, and perhaps everything truly was drawing to a close. "It probably won't be long," Liyue said lightly, though to Círdan the words carried weight. "Thousands of years ago," Círdan murmured, "when Gandalf first came to the Havens, I gave him the Ring of Fire. Perhaps it helped to ease his weariness and kindle hope. You too have come now, but I have nothing to offer," Círdan added, turning from the sea. "If there is anything I can do, say the word." "There is," Liyue replied. He looked out at a freshly launched white ship and met Círdan's eyes. "Círdan the Shipwright, I need your skill." The name struck twice. Círdan itself means shipwright, and he had earned that title by his craft. Círdan's face shadowed with the reddish-gold light on the water as he agreed. "At your service." That month, Liyue stayed with Círdan and took part in shipbuilding. As he worked, a new module unlocked within him, a revelation of shipwright knowledge, and a host of new recipes appeared in his mind. Rudders, anchors, navigational instruments, keel and frame structures. Liyue looked over the newly learned designs with a quiet sense of awe. Entrusted with tasks by the Valar, Círdan's skill was unsurpassed. Numenor's techniques had been taught by him. Gondor's fleet bore his influence. Splash, waves struck the rocks. An elf at a carpentry bench held up a crafted part and blinked. "My lord, this part is perfect," he said in wonder. "Perfection lies only in Valinor," Círdan replied gently. But when he stepped closer and saw the piece, he fell silent. It was ideal, flawless, and precisely formed, as if made by the purest hand. He could hardly believe it. "Who made this?" "This part was made by Lord Liyue," the elf said. "Ah." Círdan nodded. "Where is he?" "At the dock." He walked toward the harbor without delay. A month earlier, when Liyue had first asked to learn shipbuilding, Círdan had taught him personally and thoroughly. After the basic lessons and practice, the old master had given a simple test: build a small boat for 2 or 3 people, just to try the skills. "If you do not understand something, ask me at any time," Círdan had said. Liyue had never asked for help, and that had led Círdan to believe his new pupil might be reserved. but seeing the perfect part had altered that impression. Círdan wanted to see Liwei's result for himself. Near the dock, Círdan stopped, his gaze distant as he looked out over the water. Under the setting sun, a massive silhouette stretched long, dwarfing the nearby houses. He stepped closer. "Good afternoon." Liwei, polishing another component, greeted him. "You've come early. The ship isn't assembled yet. You can't start her up. Come by the same time tomorrow and I should finish the final step. Then I'll show you," Liwei replied, patting the enormous hull beside him. "Valar preserve us." Círdan, recovering from his first shock, let out a breath. "I told you to build a small boat to test yourself, and you, this!" He looked up at the vessel moored at the quay. It was enormous, a true flagship even Círdan would call a masterpiece. Chapter 242, New Specializations. "A small boat?" Liwei pointed from the flagship toward a vessel anchored a few dozen meters away. "Over there. I wasn't completely satisfied with the first one, so I rebuilt it." Círdan's eyelids twitched. "You call that a small boat?" The shipyard manager hurried over to Círdan like a man clutching at a savior. "Sir, our materials are limited." "Enough. It's already enough." Círdan's tone tightened. He stared at the vessel and said, "That ship is very good. It would be sufficient for a voyage to the west. I declare that you have completely mastered shipbuilding. There is nothing more I can teach you." The speed of Liwei's learning was simply terrifying. Círdan remembered only showing examples of parts and explaining how to assemble and splice, no full demonstration. How had Liwei reached this level? Had he learned merely by observing once? The thought that Liwei's ability grew with each encounter, with no clear upper limit, unnerved him. Círdan pushed the speculation away and turned his attention back to the unfinished flagship before them. "A good ship needs good helmsmen and sailors," he said. "When you need them, tell me. Our best navigators and crews will come and teach everything they know without reservation." He considered the flagship for a moment and then outlined a route, tracing it with a finger in the air. "It can pass through the Gulf of Lune to the open sea, head south, and enter the lonely land through the port of Londare. I recall your territory lies that way. Don't worry, the port of Londare is long abandoned, but it can still be of use." "No need." Liwei waved off the offer. "Let this ship stay here. It was made from your materials. Consider it a graduation gift from an apprentice to his master. Graduated in a month, at light speed." Círdan smiled wryly. "You are too modest. I taught very little. Most of the knowledge required to build this ship you learned and comprehended yourself." Liwei was even more self-aware. He had been able to build so quickly because of his crafting table, the sample parts and blueprints unlocked as soon as he examined them. The actual assembly still required recall and care. Any mistake in structure, and the ship could collapse. "You're being modest too," he replied. Círdan had no answer. A few days later, the flagship Liwei had designed and refined was assembled and successfully sailed on its trial run. It remained at the port in Linden and was named Apprentice, commemorated by the elves as Liwei's first work after mastering shipbuilding. "Your generosity is admirable," Círdan said more than once as they parted. A month passed. Once the lessons were complete, Liwei presented a return gift. He took out a golden apple that gleamed with an unearthly luster. "I hope you like it." Círdan accepted it solemnly. Like the treasures of Valinor, the apple would never rot or wither. As long as it was kept, it could accompany him forever. "If one day you absolutely must use it, do not withhold it out of fear of wasting it," Liwei advised. "If it is consumed to save a life, then this gift has fulfilled its purpose, and I will be genuinely glad." "I will," Círdan nodded. "A golden apple, alive with vitality, able to heal, and valuable both materially and artistically, as a token in return for shipbuilding instruction, would have been a satisfying close to their exchange." But Liwei had one more surprise. He set a beacon in the center of the Grey Havens. When it was lit, every elf in the haven felt a stirring in their core. They raised their faces to the beam of light and gathered beneath it. Life and vigor surged through them, arresting the slow decline that age had been bringing. Círdan stood quietly, moved. "This is perfection," he murmured. "Perfection. Perhaps it has always been with us." When Liwei left the Grey Havens, a column of light reached into the sky, and people would sing and record the day as the beginning of a new legend. Back at Roadside Fort, Leeway spread a map and examined the nearby terrain and waterways. Near the fort, at the last bridge beside the Troll Forest, a river traced southward toward the Lonely Land and even to the river bend near Rivendell. Its source led to the sea. As Círdan had suggested, if the waterway could be put to use, it would make an excellent transport route. If the river was too shallow or narrow, it could be dug and reshaped. What mattered was claiming the land to do it. Since establishing the Experience Farm, Leeway's territory capacity had grown. Maintaining dozens of holdings was no longer a problem, though beyond that, the experience required to level up rose sharply. At high levels, it became very difficult to expand further. Enchantments themselves also consumed levels, so he had to choose carefully which territories to keep. Leeway marked an X on his map, the delta where the Loudwater met the Horwell. With some modification and expansion, the site could serve as a harbor or even a shipyard. Its natural terrain made development simpler and would save a lot of work. That wasn't the only promising waterway. His new territory in the Anduin Valley, home to the Beown clan, was traversed by the great river Anduin, the longest river of the Third Age. It rose in northern mountains, flowed through the Beown lands and the Golden Iris Marsh, bordered the Golden Wood, cut across Rohan and Gondor, and finally poured into the sea. The route was ideal for transport. Several dedicated transfer points could be established along it. Rivertown, by contrast, could only support ships in its internal rivers and the Sea of Rune, an issue to be dealt with later. As the saying goes, leave specialized tasks to specialists. The exact implementation of these plans would require more discussion and planning. For now, Leeway closed the map and said decisively, "We need to open some new specializations at the school." Chapter 243, Escape from Lonely Mountain. By the end of 2948, Roadside Fort had established a nautical technology program, with navigators and sailors from Lindon serving as instructors. Small groups of elves began appearing in Roadside Fort. Ordinarily, elves preferred quiet, peaceful places and avoided bustling cities. When they gathered, it was usually only with their own kind. The elves who came to teach at Roadside Fort were told they could return home whenever they wished if they could not adapt. So far, none had asked to leave. Curiosity drew them. Even the beautiful lands of Lindon could grow dull after a long time, and seeing new places was a welcome change. Many were also drawn by the world's new legends. Several volunteered specifically to see Leeway's residence. The results surprised them. In beauty, Roadside Fort rivaled any elven realm. Though at first the elves felt uneasy being separated from kin and having to interact with so many humans, they soon found the people there pleasant, especially their spiritual vitality, a kind of infectious liveliness unlike the humans they had known. And the wine, there was always wine, and it was intoxicating, a true marvel of Middle-earth. With nautical technology established, the Craftsman Academy added a naval architecture branch. Knowledge and talent for river and sea navigation began to flourish. Time passed into 2949. Snow and ice mixed with mud melted from the roads. Many people only realized the change when they felt the wet earth underfoot. Another new year had come. Life was mostly peaceful, but in places people did not expect, sudden commotions could erupt, just like at Erebor. A not very tall figure burst out of the fortress, another close on his heels. "Balin, where are you going?" "Come back," Thorin called, striding after him. On horseback, Gandalf glanced back at Balin, who had just caught up, and then looked toward Thorin. "Go, Gandalf, hurry. I don't want to stay here." Balin clutched Gandalf's robe, his beard trembling with urgency. "All right, hold on tight." Gandalf smiled wryly. No sooner had he spoken than the horse lurched, carrying them away. In an instant, only their backs were visible. Thorin tried to follow, but a dwarf is no match for a horse over distance. He panted, clutching his chest. Who? Why run so fast? I'm not keeping you from a holiday." "Can't there be a little more trust?" Gandalf called back, but Balin was already focused on the freedom he felt. "Is this freedom, Gandalf?" Balin asked. "Perhaps." Gandalf's answer drew a scowl. "Durin above, can you stop sounding like those elves? Every time I ask them anything, they say perhaps." Gandalf couldn't help it. He burst into laughter, his beard quivering. "A pertinent observation, Master Balin. And where exactly are we going?" Balin pressed. West of the Misty Mountains. Gandalf said after a pause. "I thought we might head toward the Blue Mountains." "That suits me." Balin craned his neck. "I haven't been to the Blue Mountains in ages. I wonder how many dwarves still live there. And Bilbo. Oh, I haven't seen him since we left Erebor after the war. I'd like to see how he's doing." "Bilbo's well," Gandalf said. "He even attended the banquet at Roadside Fort last time. He seemed cheerful." "Don't mention it," Balin bristled when he heard about the banquet. "Such a grand event, and Thorin and the others left me behind." "They were too drunk to notice," Gandalf said with a chuckle. "You should have seen them. You were spared some embarrassment, being out-drunk by elves, no less." Balin was scandalized, and hearing Gandalf's account of the banquet misadventures, regained a little dignity. "Ha! When I return, I'll have a story to tell." At the entrance to Long Lake Town, the great elevator began to move, and before long, Gandalf and Balin arrived at the start of the Sky Road, Starting Point Town. Balin took in the bustle and then peered down at the forest below. "It's beautiful. I could almost live here." "So you'll stay?" Gandalf teased. No, Balin waved him off. The place was too close to Erebor. He didn't want to be found and dragged back. "Let's be on our way. There'll be more beauty along the road." Gandalf spread the map he carried and touched a mark where the Sky Road was drawn in later. "If things go smoothly, we can reach Carl Town by nightfall." "You might not have been. It's the Bayonne clan's new town, close to Carrick. We can rest there a night, then go to Halfway Town at the Misty Mountains the next day and reach Roadside Fort on the 3rd. At the mention of how long journeys once took, Gandalf fell quiet, thinking, "In the old days, that trip would have taken me at least a month." "No more lamenting. Let's go," Balin urged, full of energy. "Don't rush, Master Balin. The weather's warm, the road's good, we have time, we can walk at leisure." Gandalf smiled. When night fell, they neared Carl Town and left the main road. Balin suddenly pointed up. "What is that?" he asked. A huge figure sat atop a towering rock, silhouetted against the moon. Gandalf looked and nodded knowingly. "It's Bjorn. He often does this." "He has a habit of sitting on Carrick and staring at the moon," Balin murmured. "Some say he watches the moon all night and sees something there. Others say he's sleeping up there," Gandalf replied with a grin. "He can look at the moon all night and not show a trace of tiredness the next day." "And you, what do you think he's doing?" Balin asked. Gandalf put on a thoughtful face. "Perhaps he's contemplating life, or something of that sort. The moon might make his mind clearer." The world, Balin sighed, had many strange things. Up on Carrick, watching the same pale moon, Bjorn indeed had his own odd thought. Why, he wondered, could some bees grow as large as a man's head? Originally, when Gandalf and Balin passed Roadside Fort, they had planned to pay a visit to Lee Way. But when they arrived, a messenger came out shaking his head. "He's not here." Gandalf fell silent. "So, shall we go?" Balin asked, looking up. "What else can we do? Is there anyone who can bring him back?" Gandalf sighed. An iron golem standing nearby watched him and, as if to console him, plucked a small flower and offered it. "Thank you," Gandalf said. "If only your master could be as well-behaved as you," the golem remarked. It meant nothing to the golem. When Gandalf took the flower, it resumed its patrol. People said Roadside Fort was impregnable, and it was not just boasting. The high wall alone was imposing. From the ground, its top was hard to see, but the real defense lay in the iron lumps that patrolled the ramparts, one of Roadside Fort's trump cards, and a reason even the free city-states hesitated to attack. To overcome them, you needed either specialized tools and weapons or an army 10 times larger led by the right commanders. And even if you could neutralize the golems, the walls were manned by excellent guards in rotating shifts, each one a fine warrior. "Better to fight the White City than to lay siege to Roadside Fort," the orcs liked to say. "Wait," Gandalf said suddenly at the crossroads where Roadside Fort met the eastern road. He had been about to continue toward the Shire, but stopped and looked to the south. There, a new road of neatly laid gray stone bricks extended away, square, even, clearly built in someone's style. When did a new road appear here? He wondered. "I don't recall a crossroads here a year ago," Balin said. "It was built within the last year," a passing resident answered. Gandalf called out, "Where does this gray road lead?" "To Riverside Stronghold." Riverside Stronghold. Gandalf and Balin exchanged glances. Neither had heard the name. It was established this year, the resident said. Shall we go take a look? Agreed, Balin said. So they changed course at the crossroads and followed the new wide road south. Sometime earlier, Li Wei had stared at a map and drawn a line straight from Roadside Fort to the river delta. When the point was set, a crew of residents set to work. A broad stone road, gray because the bricks were made of stone, ran from the junction to the southern delta. Locals nicknamed it the Gray Road, and Li Wei, amused, immediately adopted the name officially. At the end of the Gray Road, where three rivers met, Li Wei ordered a new structure built, a castle on a prominent riverside high ground. He named it Riverside Stronghold. It stood where it could be seen from far away. Around it would rise shipyards, docks, cranes, an entire maritime complex. The shipyard was to combine the inherited knowledge and latest research of humans, elves, and dwarves, all channeled through Li Wei's direction. Even so, construction would take time. Great cities were never built in a few weeks. Even with the territory secured, months of work and topographical changes remained. The talent pipeline would lag, too. The first cohort from Roadside Fort's School for Navigation and Marine Engineering would not graduate for some time. It might be possible to establish a branch campus here, Li Wei thought, and he decided to do it. Once the shipyard was ready, a campus would open for all related majors, lecturers, teaching aides, and practice facilities in one place. Nothing accelerated learning like hands-on work. A knock sounded at the castle gate while Li Wei stood at a window watching the site. He went to open it. "Gandalf," he said in surprise. "How did you?" "And me," Balin added, appearing on the path below. "Long time no see, Balin. Welcome, welcome. Is your work finished?" No, don't bring that up," Balin said, hugging Li Wei with mock grievance. "Don't you know those fellows were impossible? They went out to play and forgot to take me." He spoke as if he were a wronged child. "I've only been away a few years, but it feels like centuries," he added, eyes bright. "I wonder if time flows differently here. There's even new territory, and such a big new castle." "Perhaps it will become a city," Gandalf said from the side. "The location is very noticeable, especially at night. We saw a beacon beam from afar, and it guided us here. We didn't even need to ask for directions." Li Wei moved aside and welcomed them in. "It was a long journey. You must be tired. Have some hot soup to warm up." It was dinner time, so Li Wei went straight to preparing a meal. They sat down to mushroom soup, roasted meat, vegetables, fruit, and bread, well balanced and well made. "Quite delicious," Balin praised. Gandalf nodded, smiling. "Honestly, after having mushroom soup at a friend's house last time, I had a slight fear of it. Yours has put me at ease." "What would you like to drink?" Li Wei asked. "Wine," Gandalf said. "A mug of ale," Balin replied. Their requests were soon brought. Over the meal, Balin steered the conversation. "We were going to visit Bilbo in the Shire," he said, "but we saw that new gray road and came here first." "This location is very good," Li Wei said. "Even if the terrain had problems, you'd find a way." "But I must warn you, Li Wei," Balin said seriously, setting down his mug. The white-bearded dwarf's expression grew grave. "Right next to this place is Moria." Chapter 245, News from the Front Line. "I've always wanted to lead a recovery there," Balin said, "but our scouts report it's still occupied by an endless, brutal orc army. On top of that, the place is full of huge, ferocious beasts and ogres." He sighed. "This needs more thought. For now, it's not the right time." "But aside from that, the real danger is how close this city is to Moria," Balin went on. "Monsters from there can be on us in a few days, sometimes faster if they push." "But the reverse is true as well," Li Wei said with a small smile. The choice of site had been unwise. Moria sat practically next door. A little further south lay the Black Land, whose mountain folk were not to be taken lightly. Lately, they seemed to be in league with Saruman. Looking at it realistically, for the next few years at least, there was little to fear. Saruman would keep them in check. Even without Saruman, the mountain folk rarely went out of their way to provoke others. They weren't quite neutral, but they tended to leave other realms alone unless provoked. Their enmity was mainly toward Rowan, and Saruman had made use of that animosity. As for who was right or wrong, history was messy and seldom offered clear answers. But one thing was certain: the orcs and the dark creatures under Sauron were evil in intent, bent on enslaving or destroying all life. There could be no negotiation with such forces. Still, Li Wei added, I believe you can defend this place. Gandalf finished the last of his soup and echoed, As long as you are here, I doubt anything will dare come through the gates. But we must be warned, Balin said. Vigilance needs to be heightened. The walls aren't built yet, and the city is still in its infancy, Gandalf agreed. The territory is fragile now. If the great enemy intends anything, it will not be a mere skirmish. Moria was vast and teeming with dark creatures, many fierce. Even after the losses in the Battle of the Five Armies, the remaining orcs in the depths numbered in the tens of thousands. Li Wei shrugged. All right, I'll pay attention, he said, returning to the roasted meat on his plate. The others fell silent. Everything that needed to be said had been said, and they trusted him to act. The meal ended. The next morning, Gandalf and Balin mounted and prepared to leave Riverside Stronghold. Li Wei saw them off to the main road. Aren't you staying a few more days? Li Wei asked, making a half-jesting attempt to keep them. We travel as we must, Gandalf replied. Our paths will cross again. If you're still here when we return, I will certainly call, Gandalf added, swinging up onto his horse. Balin, with a little help, climbed up behind him. All right, I look forward to our next meeting, Li Wei waved. The horses clopped away. Just as they were about to ride off, a hard thudding thunder of hooves approached. Li Wei! A rider sped in, reining up and dropping from his saddle with the quick, practiced motion of a man who had spent his life on horseback. Followed on? Li Wei said. What's the hurry? Balin asked. It's intelligence, Followdon said, glancing quickly at Gandalf and Balin to confirm they were allies before he spoke plainly. News from the ruins of Eregion. A large number of orcs massed at Moria's west gate last night, alongside several ghostly figures. The scouts thought they were wights, but these had an aura far stronger and darker. Ringwraiths, Gandalf and Li Wei said together. Followden nodded. The report came from a fresh batch of scouts. They've not faced ringwraiths before, and took them for unusually powerful wights. That explains it. Tell them to fall back and regroup. Ordinary folk can't face those things. Gandalf dismounted without a word. It's done already. They're right behind me, Followden replied. Gandalf rubbed his chin. Then our trip to the Shire will be postponed. Agreed. These old bones of mine need to be moving anyway. Balin hopped down at once. An old warrior with a young heart, he muttered. They drew up a quick meeting in the Great Hall. Faced with a threat that looked to be more than a mere raid, the others bristled with tension. Li Wei, who had been buried in the work of building the stronghold, seemed unusually relaxed. He'd been planning for trouble. Now the trouble had come to him, and he was ready to meet it head-on. So how many? He asked. Many. No fewer than 10,000, Followden said. Gandalf's brows knitted. Followden's face tightened. He had roamed these lands long enough to know the geography and politics in greater detail than either Balin or Gandalf. He also knew what their present forces amounted to. And the scouts are certain? Gandalf asked. They're confident, Followden said. And they wouldn't make a move like this without preparation. Everyone knows whose lands these are. They wouldn't attack rashly. How many soldiers do we have here now? Balin asked. Only a few hundred at Riverside Stronghold, Followden answered. That's the harsh truth. Balin thought fast. Roadside Fort isn't far. We can draw troops from there. Buy enough time, send word, and Erebor will dispatch its finest. Gandalf let out a small ring of smoke and added, And don't forget the elves. Rivendell is not far. Elrond will not simply watch this place be besieged. I'll go to Rivendell at once. No need, Li Wei interrupted, waving a hand before Balin or Gandalf could finish their plans. Chapter 246. They all ran away. It's just some orcs. We don't need reinforcements yet. Gandalf and Balin both frowned at that. Those are tens of thousands of orcs. There will surely be ogres and other giant beasts too. I know you're strong, Li Wei. If it were only you, you could probably cut through their ranks without trouble. But this is a defense. You must hold this territory. You're not a mountain-sized stone giant. You can't be everywhere at once. While you are occupied in one place, others will be left undefended. I understand that, Li Wei said with a smile. Followden, how many wanderers can you gather from around here? Your own, never mind. Followden gave up on lecturing the detached leader and answered, From Windcloud Hills to South Ridge and from South Ridge down to the Riverbend area, we could probably muster over 1,000 wanderers within 3 days. Our kin aren't far away from the gathering point either, Followdon added. They can come to support us, but given our situation, a few hundred is the limit. Wanderers were few and scattered across Eriador. You might meet one anywhere in the wilds, but it was rare to encounter many at once, rarer than Lee Wei staying in one place to work. There's also Roadside Fort, Followdon continued. Between the trainers and the regulars, excluding wanderers currently out on missions, the ready forces here number about 3,000. 3,000 soldiers plus over 1,000 wanderers, Gandalf summarized. That's enough. With those people we can hold the walls, raise defenses, add iron golems inside. So long as we handle the ringwraiths and whatever tricks they bring, Moria's army won't break through. Historically, there have been battles where one side had far fewer numbers and still prevailed. Not enough, Lee Wei said abruptly. They all stared at him. Gandalf was the first to break the silence. Is that not sufficient? Over 4,000 trained fighters. That should hold. Lee Wei stood. I want to see the limits of the territories. Which territories? Followdon asked. All of them. That day, several hundred laborers halted other tasks and sped up construction of the city walls. Because the settlement sat beside the river, they could use the water as a natural barrier and reduce the workload. Under the accelerated schedule, the foundation was laid in a single morning, and the city's outline was obvious. Next came raising the wall higher and higher, stacking earth and stone until the barrier loomed up. For now, they focused on mere height. Finer concerns like structural elegance could wait. As long as the defenses were within the territory, anything built would serve the purpose. He's gone. Outside the fort, the 3 remaining leaders watched Lee Wei depart. Balin turned to the others, looking for direction. So what do we do? We should teach him a lesson, Gandalf muttered. Let him know a lord shouldn't leave before a war. Followdon patted the short-tempered old dwarf on the shoulder to calm him. He's always like this. Don't be angry. He may seem unreliable, but he'll return when it matters. Would he joke with the lives of his people? Of course not, Gandalf admitted. From what I've seen, there's no one who cares more about his people than he does, not even the elves who live apart from the world. Then trust him. Followdon mounted his horse. I'm heading to Roadside Fort to organize the mobilization. When Lee Wei left, Followdon naturally took responsibility for the immediate defense, though he didn't officially belong to Roadside Fort. The fort had no strict hierarchy for such crises. Whoever was capable took charge. Followdon knew the area, Lee Wei's territory, and Lee Wei himself better than most, so he was the right choice. Once he arrived at Roadside Fort and outlined the situation, both the instructors and the common folk there nominated him to lead the mobilization. They had many reserve commander candidates. There were so many that they had to be numbered. Every soldier was prepared to step up as a commander if needed, part of recent policies that had begun to take root across the territories. At the gates of Roadside Fort, Gandalf and Balin exchanged glances. With Lee Wei gone and Followdon riding off, the 2 of them were left behind, 2 who knew this area the least. Are you leaving too? Balin asked. Leave? Where would I go? Gandalf shook his head. Lee Wei and Followdon, who have killed ringwraiths before, have both gone. Any sudden danger now will fall to me. I must stay and guard. Then I'll stay with you, Balin said. Gandalf pushed open the armory's heavy door. Lee Wei said the armory is on the left. Use this time to find a weapon that suits you. Clang. When the armory door opened, Balin's eyes lit up. Weapons of elves, dwarves, men, even orc-forged blades lined the racks. This is marvelous, Balin breathed. If I had an armory like this, I could spend the whole day admiring them. He reached for a dwarven steel battle axe. This one, he declared, big, solid, heavy, and sharp. No orc's head could survive a single swing. Chapter 247. Quickly completed in Middle-earth, the wizards' absolute standing and formidable powers naturally gave them the right to involve themselves in any major affair. Today was no different. Besides joining the defense, and so long as the Lord and regional administrators did not forbid it, wizards also held a measure of command authority within their own faction, authority that reflected their prestige. For instance, Gandalf, If the White City lost its prime minister in wartime and no successor was at hand, could for a time assume the prime minister's authority. After millennia of accumulation, the wizard's status stood second only to the highest rulers. They were versatile, able to fill whatever role was needed. Radagast was an exception, an unusual, purely supportive wizard who preferred summoning animal friends to taking command in battle. Everyone, listen up! Be especially wary of the southwest. Orcs will most likely attack from that direction. Gandalf called out. That ranger squad over there, head for the bridge and scout the area. I need regular updates on their advance. At Riverside Stronghold, Gandalf was preparing for the coming battle. He served as the fortress's supreme commander by Leeway's leave. Standing beside him was Balin, an old and learned dwarf who had long served as a general. He could lead a vanguard on the front line or command from the rear. Are we just supposed to wait here? Balin asked, staring toward Moria across the river, his gaze distant. If you want something to do, there are things I can entrust to you, Gandalf said. Such as, ride to Rivendell and speak with the elves. Ask them for reinforcements. Balin snorted. Might as well storm Moria myself then. Didn't Leeway say we didn't need to ask for help? He did, Gandalf agreed. But if aid is truly needed, it's possible no one will need to ask. Our allies nearby will come of their own accord. When something major happened, Leeway requesting help would mean the situation was critical and required immediate support. And if he didn't request help, it might mean he hadn't had the time to do so, an even more urgent circumstance demanding faster assistance. All the while, the residents of the territory continued their emergency preparations. Hot, molten rock poured in sections. As each stream hit the ground, it was doused by buckets of water falling from above, instantly cooling into stone. This was the emergency wall-building method the residents had learned from their lord. Of course, everyone understood it worked only within lands suffused with the Lord's power. From afar, it was useless. A ranger who had been sent out earlier returned, breathless and shaken, no longer his usual composed self. They'll be here in 2 days at the fastest, he said. He tumbled out the rest of the report. Their earlier intelligence had underestimated the threat. The OK army was even larger than anticipated, at least 3 times the number of troops they could muster quickly. That's at least 15,000, the ranger continued. They've brought many siege beasts. They've come out in full force. And, about the ring wraiths, we saw at least 3 of them. At least, Gandalf asked. At least, the ranger repeated. We were discovered. I swear our disguise and stealth were flawless, but one of the ring wraiths suddenly shrieked and charged. He seemed to know every place we'd ever hide, or at least our habits. The ranger's voice dropped. Thankfully, our horses were fast and stubborn. They kept going, despite being shot at, until we escaped. If they'd gone down, we wouldn't have made it back. He patted the swift horse beside him and fed it some grain. If Leeway had been present, he would have noticed the horse's recovery. The animal had been at death's door before the grain. Those arrows had nearly killed it, despite its iron barding and more than 30 health points. Gandalf nodded toward the mounts. Horses from Roadside Fort are like that, fast, hardy, and unfazed by extremes of heat or cold. They can run long distances on very little, and they recover quickly with a bit of feed. The only drawback is they're stubbornly dull, he added. Unless you ride them or keep them tied, they won't obey. I agree, the ranger said, and the conversation slid into a surprisingly practical dialect about horse care, until Balin, who rarely rode horses and whose people preferred boars and goats, looked baffled. Oh, right, this isn't the time to go on about tack and stables, Gandalf said, snapping back to the task at hand. The residents of Leeway's lands shared his temperament, one moment preparing for war, the next chatting about everyday matters. Their knack for derailing conversation was uncanny. Now we need to focus on strengthening our defenses, Gandalf said. Indeed. The ranger immediately hefted a block and joined the others, slipping naturally into the construction crew. Seeing their captain work, the returning scouts followed suit. Soon the rangers returning from the surrounding wilds outnumbered the original builders and became the main labor force. Balin watched the high wall rise quickly and sighed. They've done everything. What's left for us? Even Gandalf felt a momentary uncertainty. Tasks were falling into place so smoothly, It almost felt unsettling. Since things are in hand, let's eat first. At dusk, they went to the makeshift mess hall and joined the queue. Though temporary, the stronghold's supplies were abundant. Nearly anything one could ask for was available, and rations were plentiful, even wine. Still, because they were on war footing, indulgence was frowned upon. Most men took nothing more than a sip with their meal. Night did not bring rest. The builders worked in shifts, racing to finish the high wall that would enclose the territory. They reinforced the riverbank too, replacing sand and gravel with solid stone. Waves crashed against the new embankment, but the wall held firm. Chapter 248, Guess Where We Are. That night was anything but peaceful. When darkness fell, the steady clamor of construction was joined by the sound of hooves as rangers rode out on patrol. They swept the surrounding hills with high-intensity watches. Any orcs trying to approach or scout were cut down before they could return. From time to time, white flares burst against the sky. "What's that?" Balin looked up sharply. "Bats," Gandalf squinted, somehow seeing a long way into the dark. "The rangers are firing flares at them." "White flares? That's reassuring. If it were a call for help, it would be glaring red." The villagers kept working into the night, but Gandalf and Balin weren't idle either. They could do little with the heavy labor, but one was a wandering wizard with centuries of experience, and the other an old scholar of 200 years. Both could act as guides, little foremen of sorts. With their direction, the work moved along in orderly fashion. At dawn, a bright, silver-white host appeared on the horizon along the gray road to the north. The force from Roadside Fort had arrived. From the top of the wall, Gandalf watched them come and felt a flicker of déjà vu. Their bearing was elven, graceful, and precise. The new gate opened, the troops filed through, and they formed ranks on the empty plain where houses had yet to be built. "Looks like we made it just in time," someone said. Falodon had donned the same style of armor. Beside the Roadside Fort troops stood several massive figures, the veteran instructors permanently assigned to the fort to train recruits. They were stoic, resolute, scarred by hardship like ancient stone. Compared to them, the regular soldiers appeared green. No wonder the rangers called them little sprouts. "Latest intelligence," a messenger reported shortly after. "The enemy numbers exceed 15,000. There are at least 3 ringwraiths." Gandalf descended from the wall to meet Falodon as the man absorbed the news. Falodon's face tightened. Riverside's stronghold had only just been founded, but its walls were solid and could be repaired if badly damaged. Still, the garrison inside, even adding the reinforcements from Roadside Fort and the labor crews, barely totaled 5,000. Every able person could fight, and most were trained to dual-wield and fight both at range and in close quarters. But against an army that size and the presence of ringwraiths, the odds were worrying. "If they were only orcs, we could handle it," Falodon muttered. "But it's more than orcs," Gandalf said. "Not to mention the monstrous beasts, they have ringwraiths." "I can take one," Falodon replied with a tight smile. "I can handle 2, Gandalf said. "Can you take the remaining one?" "Of course," Falodon said, patting his breastplate confidently. "I once defeated a ringwraith in the Far East." "Good, very good," Gandalf nodded. Balin, however, was not pleased. "Hey, don't forget there's a dwarf here. Can't you give me one?" "You can certainly try," Gandalf said, "but if it comes to it, you stay by my side. The moment a ringwraith appears, you jump up and clobber it on the head." Balin glared at him. "What did you say? Was that a subtle insult?" he grumbled. "No, Master Balin, just advice." "That's excellent advice. I almost want to leap up and try it with you." "Oh, please don't. Old as I am, I couldn't handle a blow from such a great axe." "So you think I'm very young, do you?" The 2 old men bickered while Falodon, only a little over 100 years old and respectful of his elders, could do nothing but listen. Sometimes doing nothing is a mistake. Small sparks grow into fires. Falodon hesitated. "What do you think, Falodon?" Gandalf asked. I think..." Falodon began, torn between caution and urgency. He thought they should fetch Leeway immediately. Far away in River Valley City, Bard felt the same. Leeway had appeared suddenly in River Valley City and issued an urgent summons. Assemble an army from the 3 towns in the territory and send them to Roadside Fort and the newly founded Riverside Stronghold across the mountains. Tens of thousands of orcs and several ringwraiths. This was no drill. Emergency assembly, Bard barked as he strapped on his armor. Except for the essential home guard, everyone dons armor and marches at the fastest pace. The gate opened with a boom. There was no time for speeches. The men surged toward the sky road saying nothing more than, "Fight for the Lord." The Bayonne clan of Carltown did the same. Seasoned and battle-hardened, they gathered their warriors and began moving to the front. Forces poured along the high sky road on the western flank of the mountains at incredible speed. Thorin, watching from the walls of Erebor, felt dumbfounded. River Valley City's mobilization was almost too fast to grasp. By the time the message reached him, that army was already a long way down the road. He watched the horizon where the host had once been and muttered, "It's Lee Wei." Dwalin, ever quick to act, ran over with news. Lee Wei issued an emergency order. He's called every available combat force to the west side of the mountains. "This feels like more than a raid," Thorin said. "It looks like they've gone to reinforce, not to conquer." "Did he tell us anything?" Dwalin asked. "No, he must have been in such a rush he didn't have time to inform us." "If Lee Wei is on the defensive, then the enemy must be an orc host numbering tens of thousands," Thorin said, pacing. "That's no small thing. We must muster our own forces." "And he didn't tell us," Dwalin repeated, watching Thorin's face. In the Black Forest, Thranduil's command rang out in the Great Hall with cold clarity. "I know his nature. He would not speak unless it was desperate. That does not mean we should stand idle while an ally walks into peril." "Prepare to mobilize," the king ordered. "And tell me, have their troops already left?" "They are almost out of the forest, my king," his attendant replied. "What?" Chapter 249, The Shadow is Approaching. Open the gates. At dusk, the rangers who had been scouting beyond the walls returned, changed into their battle gear, and climbed the ramparts to join the garrison. Compared with the soldiers who had come up from the roadside fort for reinforcements, the rangers were composed, used to combat, to tracking and roaming the wilderness, to fighting every few days. A few of the fort's men muttered they should have become rangers too, but war was never so simple. When the real fight came, mindset mattered above all. "The situation is serious. The Auke army is already approaching. We'll probably see them before sunset." It is indeed serious. In the camp below, a soldier complained about an overcooked piece of meat. Another, stopping only to deliver a message, suggested stewing it. The first soldier proposed chopping it, adding spices, and stuffing it into a loaf. "I heard Lord calls that rugiamo," one said. They began to plan the best way to cut the meat, only to be cut off by a shout, "Assemble!" They hastily ran toward the sound, grabbing a few hurried bites as they ran. An instructor, exasperated at the crumbs at their mouths, barked at them to wipe up. The two obeyed guiltily, while the instructor muttered a weary wish for their courage. Silence returned to the wall, and the soldiers tightened their nerves. Every sense sharpened, every detail scanned. From the distance came a low rumble, and then a terrifying cry that made many of them gasp. Fear curled through their ranks, even among the rangers. "Be brave!" Gandalf and Felodon moved along the parapet, passing where soldiers stood and bolstering them. Each time they moved on, anxiety crept back, but their presence was like a bonfire on a winter night, warming those nearest. Still, even a bonfire could not banish the night entirely. "Much more frightening than a wight," a ranger squad leader said under his breath, staring at three dark, far-off figures whose presence made his breath quicken. Gandalf ran, shouted words of encouragement, and lifted his ring-wreathed hand. The small sparks of hope he could kindle held, wavering in the cold wind. From the enemy lines came an unpleasant laugh. The Aoka army halted at a position just beyond the range of their rockets and fireworks. A dozen or so steel-armored giant beasts took up position at the front as an ominous vanguard. Orcs murmured and roared, only calming when the ringwraiths cast them a glare. Gandalf narrowed his eyes. The army seemed oddly unruly. They had come all this way, and yet Lee Wei was nowhere to be seen in the north. Balin. Balin wiped cold sweat from his brow and blinked to attention. "Keep your head," Gandalf said quietly. "You might feel like charging in, but you must act calm. We need to hold this place until Lee Wei returns." "Understood," Balin said, sliding into his usual composure. Gandalf led him to a place atop the main gate and sat down to watch the ringwraiths. "Something's not right," he murmured. "We have to stall." 15,000 orcs were daunting, but if it were just them, the defenders could sally out and fight. The real danger were those towering beasts and the ring wraiths. The three wraiths had halted at the line's front, conversing in whisper shadows. One remained as silent as a piece of armor, motionless on his horse. At last the two consulted him. "Attack," the quiet one said. The answer was brief, and when the command came, the assault began. Stones and boulders flew up and slammed into the walls. Boom after boom, the outermost face cracked and collapsed in places, leaving jagged gaps. "Fire!" called the captain. On the ramparts, archers loosed a storm of arrows. Orcs fell by the dozen. The unarmored flanks of the giant beasts were riddled with feathered shafts. One beast inhaled a flaming arrow and roared as flame leapt from its throat. "Free fire!" followed unordered. Men with fire-enchanted bows redirected, raining burning arrows into the beasts' mouths and nostrils. Flames leapt high. Beasts fell, rolling to put out the blaze. The prepared siege engines couldn't close. The ringwraiths answered with darker arts. A green glowing arrow arced over the ramparts. Faladan dodged, but another found him, as if the shooter had predicted his move. The bolt shattered on his body with an unreasoning force, and Faladan flew backward like a rag doll. He went tumbling toward the wall's lip when a staff halted his fall. Blood spouted from his abdomen. The world tilted. Life hung by a thread, but the instructors kept the rhythm of command. Someone took over Falodan's post at once. Falodan ripped open 2 flasks, one of milk, one of a pink healing draught, drank them down, and stood again, his wounds knitting. Only battered armor testified to the blow he had taken. "I can still fight," he said. A black, shadowy figure lunged up the wall and climbed as if it were air, appearing at the top like a living stain. Screams rose. Several men lay writhing, Morgul blade fragments embedded in them. The shards had a will of their own, crawling toward the heart, and their poison and evil whispering drew victims into delirium. Those wounded stared not at the rampart, but at their deepest nightmares. Without relief, they would be driven mad, die, or worse, be dragged into the shadow and become wights. "Stop!" Faladan roared. He drew his ancient sword and met the ringwraith in bitter steel. The Morgul blade clashed with his blade. For a time, they were evenly matched. Medics and others poured milk and healing draught into the wounded and dragged the most grievously cut away. Yet some would not wake, their minds trapped still in horrid visions. The price of a single cut was near ruin. Gandalf lifted his staff in a white flare. The ringwraiths battling Faladan were forced back into shadow. Light drove them away. Gandalf then drew Glamdring. The ring on his hand shone, and a red-hot flame coiled around the blade. Anything struck by that sword would fare badly. 2 more ringwraiths had somehow reached the wall and appeared above in a spiral of cold wind and laughter. The 3 figures loomed like a mountain. Below, 6 of the giant beasts slammed siege ram and engine into the city gate. The first impact cracked wood and stone. The second strike loosened bolts and splinters. A third would break it. The last sun slid away beneath the rim. A ringwraith pronounced the doom in a voice like falling night. "Your sun has set." The cries of battle mingled with the grinding of the siege. Soldiers held where they could. Gandalf and the others kept the wall, but the pressure built, the shadow pressing in. Far away, across the plains of Rovanion, a rider spurred along the wine road, crossed the ferry, and made for the River Valley Road without stopping. As dusk fell, the city rose ahead. His horse panted, flecked with sweat. An elf leapt from the saddle and peered about, searching for someone. "I have never seen an elf quite like you," a voice said from behind. "You carry a worldly air." The elf turned. "Who are you?" "Legolas of the Woodland Realm," the newcomer replied. "And you?" "Orifer of Dorwinion. I tend a vineyard." Legolas studied him. Most elves of Middle-earth were aloof, tending ancient groves and shunning the bustle of men, but Orifer had a different cast, earthly open. Legolas inclined his head politely. "Dorwinion, it has been a long while since one of your kin visited the forest. How fare things there?" "Much the same," Orifer answered, "but I have urgent business with the lord of this place." "Liwai?" Legolas asked. "He is the lord here." "Do you know him?" Legolas smiled. "Yes, Liwai and I are friends. Almost everyone here knows him." "Good. Can you bring me to him?" Legolas hesitated only a moment. "He is not here. His lieutenant, The acting commander has ridden west with troops to the Misty Mountains. They prepare for a great battle. I am going there as well, Orifer said. He did not elaborate. Legolas's expression tightened. Then defenses here are thin, no generals remain. The dwarf army of Erebor still garrisons nearby, Legolas said. Their king is an ally of Li Wei. If pressed, they would not stand aside. Do you wish to speak with them? I will, Orifer said without question. The elves of Dorwinion bore no grudge against dwarves. He had no qualms. Mount, Legolas said. He offered Orifer his horse. The two rode swiftly toward the lonely stone of Erebor. May I ask what you came to speak of? Legolas asked as they rode. Orifer's voice dropped. A shadow, the shadow from the east, is drawing near to this place. Now it's 3 against 2. 3 against 2? A voice rang up from below. It's clearly 3 against 3. Balin hurried up the steps. Gandalf looked at him, surprised. How did you? Don't ask, Gandalf. I just came before I had time to be afraid. What do we do now? Which one do I hit? Stay at my side. A shriek cut across the ramparts. The 3 ringwraiths moved in perfect unison. One swept toward Gandalf, the other 2 struck for Faladin. They'd worked it out, remove the weaker opponent first, then turn on the wizard. Die! One of them hissed. Faladin beat one blow aside, but another lunged with a crushing swing, an axe hammer shaped into a single terrifying instrument, its crimson eyes fixed forward like a craftsman eyeing iron. If that strike landed, Faladin's potions wouldn't save him. He drew a dagger and twisted his body, angling for the smallest damage. Don't die in one hit. There's still a chance. A clang rang out. A steel axe flashed into view and struck the helm of the ringwraith wielding the axe hammer, making it hum and staggering the rider. Balin rolled, patted his chest, and drew a ragged breath. Ha! I did it! He'd struck the wraith in the head, an achievement no dwarf in living memory had managed. The stunned ringwraith reached instinctively behind for a weapon and found nothing, so he drew a Morgul blade from the other side and lunged at the shorter attacker. On the other flank, Faladin met another wraith's blade with the ancient tomb sword. Sparks flew where the steel met Morgul iron. With all the force he could muster, Faladin parried, then drove his dagger into the empty helmet of the ringwraith in front of him. The helmet felt wrong beneath the dagger. No ordinary metal, no flesh, something forbidden. The sensation defied description. A terrible, piercing scream ripped out of the wraith. It flashed backward, dozens of meters. Soldiers nearby dove aside to avoid whatever fled with it. Help! Someone cried. Balin's wraith pressed him hard, axe and blade locked, and Balin's eyes searched frantically for reinforcements. Nobody told me ringwraiths were this strong. He's like the best of the dwarf warriors. This is unlike anything I've faced. As a veteran of stone and tunnel, Balin had never faced a ringwraith before, and the wraith seemed unused to dwarves as well. Against humans and rangers, the wraith could strike heavy and unnerve them, but dwarves were different, sturdier, prying, more stubborn. The wraith's solution was straightforward brute force. The sword bit at Balin's skin, and he shouted to the nearby soldiers, "Lads over there, don't just stand. Come help." A few men moved, but the wraith turned its head and let out a low, bone-deep growl. The sound froze them where they stood. Their limbs went numb. Their breathing turned shallow, sweat standing out on their brows, as if some inner sickness had seized them. When Balin looked another way, the ringwraith followed his gaze and threatened in that direction too. No one dared move. The wraith's influence kept the defense pinned. Balin bellowed. Boom! A silver-white light exploded and a blazing straight sword flashed down, driving the ringwraith back. Glamdring cut through the gloom. Gandalf stood between them and the enemy. Gandalf! Balin gasped. Your courage is commendable. Stay close to me, Gandalf said, stepping forward. Even so, several soldiers felled by the wraith's malign power were carried away, and the defense along the gate was effectively halved. With Gandalf's arrival, however, the trio regained the advantage. The 3 ringwraiths found themselves held at bay again. The 3 of us are really strong, aren't we? Balin gripped his axe and glowered at the nearest wraith. Yes, you can keep thinking that. Gandalf replied, eyes fixed on the enemy. For a moment there was a tense stalemate, until a tremendous explosion echoed from below. Bang! The gate shattered. The attackers roared, and orcs cheered. Their leaders grinned as if victory were at hand. But their joy died a second later, when they saw that behind the broken gate stood another wall. The orc chieftain's face twisted in fury. "Damn it, they don't even have a gate," he spat, baffled at how foes had gotten inside. Even the ringwraith showed hints of irritation at the unexpected wall. The assault was far from over, though. A huge siege ladder, pushed by ogres, was already completed and being shoved into place. Fireworks and sallies of flame detonated against the lead ogres, slowing them but doing little lasting harm. Their hide was too thick for ordinary blows. Fortunately, the swords wielded by the defenders were not ordinary either. They held. "Hey!" Faladin called out across the wall to the trainee rangers who were trembling on the parapet. His voice was loud, mocking but sharp. "Perform well, and perhaps your lord will personally give you bonus points." "Bonus points?" Someone echoed, bewildered. The trainees felt a sudden weight of eyes upon them. Longing, hope. A young ranger drew, knocked an arrow, and let it fly. Thwack! The ringwraith cut the shaft in two, scattering splinters. The boy smiled anyway. He had attacked. At first, the shriek of the wraiths had left men slack-jawed and nearly insensate, their limbs betraying them as if a disease crawled inside. But watching the fight up on the wall changed something. Fear remained, and the black breath still gnawed at them, but now they could lift their weapons. They could aim, even if their hands shook. They were not entirely helpless. The battle on the parapet held. The three defenders, wizard, dwarf, and swordsman, kept the Nazgul from breaking the line, while below the siege continued to grind on. Resistance had begun to harden. That alone gave the defenders hope. Chapter 251, Unease. When the ringwraith's advance stalled and the soldiers recovered their footing, the orcs' assault quickly collapsed again. It was obvious that if it continued like this, the attackers would be wiped out. Yet the ringwraith seemed utterly unconcerned about losses, as if the orcs and ogres spilling away were not theirs. Their figures faded along the city wall and melted back toward the rear. "He's not here," one of them observed. "If he had been," another replied, "he would have come out by now to finish it." He was not the sort to watch from the shadows while his subordinates died. End the probing. How deep did they dig? Beneath our feet. They fear the light and the aura within the walls and won't come closer. It was difficult enough to lure them this far. Then attack directly. No sooner said than the ground began to rumble. The city wall trembled, the earth giving way as something huge broke the surface. A spot just outside the wall collapsed, and a colossal shape burst up from the ground. It opened a mawed mouth and slammed the nearest stretch of wall, swallowing the stones and grinding them to dust. Chunks of earth and masonry flew, coating the faces of the men nearby. The beast's body blotted out the night sky, casting the whole field into darkness. "Earthworms!" Balin exclaimed, recognizing the creature. "Why outside the wall? Wouldn't they have dug in with the orcs and launched a surprise if that was their plan?" No one answered. Every eye was fixed on the monster. A soldier swung blindly at its bulk. The enormous, writhing worm shrieked and reared back, releasing the starlight and moonlight. The gap it had chewed in the wall now yawned wide. "Attack!" The cry rolled across the field. Roars urged the army forward like whips. Ogres surged first, clashing with the iron golems that had rushed up at the sound. Because Roadside Fort had been established only recently, not many minerals had been stockpiled in the rush, and Li Wei had been able to summon only about 100 iron golems before he left. They were sturdy, but far too few against tens of thousands and a tide of giant beasts. Against the ogres, the golems were evenly matched, but the subterranean worms were so immense, the golems had to rear back to take in their full height. "Hold the wall!" Gandalf shouted as he ran forward, Glamdring flashing. Where ordinary swords would glance off, Glamdring bit deep. He hacked and cleaved at ogres, opening deep wounds, and struck at the beast's forefeet to throw them off balance. Behind him, rallied soldiers formed an iron line and refused to yield. A hastily organized repair team pushed forward, but the damage was massive. "Too many enemies. Repairs can't keep up. Think of something," someone called. "They've withdrawn," came a terse report. "It's our turn." 3 ringwraiths exploited the opening, pressing the attack. Pressure surged, even Gandalf's jaw tightened. Under the ringwraith's strikes, some iron golems were torn down, leaving only a few iron ingots and a fleck of crimson where metal and animating force had been ripped apart. The golems made heavy, clanking advances, but the ringwraiths moved like afterimages, too fast to be intercepted. Once the ringwraiths made a breach, the giant worms and other beasts surged through, squeezing in after them. The line wavered. The iron golems were near being overwhelmed. Balin, smashing the heads of orcs roughly his height aside, shouted to Gandalf, "Ringwraiths, giant beasts, ogres, orcs. This assault is too fierce. Gandalf, what do we do? Can we keep blocking them here?" They could hold, at least for a time. Roadside Fort's soldiers were hardy and tenacious. They would not break easily. The gap, however, needed more than tenacity. Gandalf, breath ragged from cutting down an ogre, answered sharply, "Ask the man who knows this place. I'm not in charge of the army." The reply was drowned in a fresh scream that cut through the night. "We still have a backup plan." Faladan pushed through and quickly organized the squads. "Retreat from the breach. Pull back." Soldiers obeyed without question and fell back from the shattered wall as if abandoning the position. The orcs who had forced their way in jeered, thinking the defenders were fleeing in confusion. They did not notice that the ringwraiths had held back, silently watching, letting the orcs charge further while the defenders withdrew on purpose. "Repair team, get ready. Demolition team 1, stand by. Fire!" A scream, a whoosh, then a huge explosion. A blinding flash and a scatter of sparks and powder filled the breach. Orcs still cramped inside the gap were blasted apart. Even ogres and the giant worms reeled under the concussive blast, toppling with skin ripped and blood flying. Fire arrow brigades rained down bolts on the fallen beasts, and an armor break squad moved in to finish any that still breathed. The demolition had created a temporary void at the wall. The repair crew surged in and threw up a wooden barricade. 10 seconds, a handful of breaths, long enough for the engineers to shift in heavier materials and begin proper reconstruction. As the wall and the terrain were hastily mended, the wave of assault fizzled out. "Did we hold?" someone panted. "More or less," Faladan said, and climbed once more onto the battlements. "Frankly," he told those around him, "defense has always been the weak point of Roadside Fort's troops, even if outsiders assume otherwise." With the fort's defenses, the obsidian-reinforced wall, the buried facilities, the layers of protection, anyone would expect it impregnable. Most of Leeway's vital installations and inconvenient secrets were underground. Even massive tunneling attacks would be self-defeating. The world thought Roadside Fort secure because its fortifications were genuinely formidable. What the soldiers preferred, however, was to charge out and smash enemy heads. The new assault had spent itself. The orcs did not withdraw altogether, but continued to make pointless strikes, hurling beasts and siege engines at any weakened section of wall. Each time the repair team plugged the breach, only to find another behind it. If the attackers insisted on battering through, the defenders were ready to pour boiling magma down and sterilize the breach. For now, Roadside Fort held. The ringwraiths made no further bold moves. They drifted from vantage to vantage, watching the battlefield with an indifference that made the defenders uneasy. That persistent, unexplained aloofness, from the beginning of the engagement to now, pressed on everyone's nerves like a recurring chill. Chapter 252, Charge. "My lord, we cannot take that city." At the back of the Auke army, the orc chieftain ran up to the ringwraiths, urgent and furious. "The wall is too strong. Even if we break through, they'll repair it right away. Their stockpiles are endless. Our men will simply run out." A few remaining giants and a squad of ogres had already been pulled back and were waiting at the rear for orders. Even an orc could see that slowly bleeding their forces like this was pointless. Siege ladders are useless. Their arrows and those odd fireworks are thicker than sand at the riverbank. Our men are cut down the moment they get close. The orc chieftain glared up at the ringwraiths. The pale, hooded figures showed no reaction to the report. He swallowed and tried again, tentative. "My lords, should we retreat?" "No. Continue the attack." When the orc suggested withdrawal, a ringwraith cut him off. "What else should we do? Just attack." "But our attacks are useless. If we keep this up—" "I told you, attack." The ringwraith sounded impatient. "My lord, we cannot. You must give us a method, or you'll just keep sending orcs to die for no reason." "Gah." Mid-sentence, the orc chieftain felt a crushing grip seize his neck and lift him into the air. "Who gave you the right to question my orders?" I only meant your orders are unreasonable. He forced out the words. Your job is to obey, not to question. The ringwraith loosened his grip an inch. The orc began to foam at the mouth. Then the chieftain said something that made the rider regret the mercy. You are not our master, the orc gasped. Even your master is only your master. Our master is stronger. He is great, fiery, from the depths of the earth. Crunch. Before he could finish, an enormous force crushed the orc's neck to dust. His body hit the ground in a dull thud. The other two ringwraiths did not react. The orc chieftain died without a sound. The ringwraith who had choked him reached down, grabbed a passing grunt, and barked, You, take his place. Me? Leader? The one-eyed orc, not bright, pointed at himself in disbelief. Yes, you. The ringwraith nodded once. Now go lead the army to attack. Yes, my lord. The new leader dropped to his knees in a clumsy, obedient bow. Complex thought was not his strong suit. Then he rose and bellowed, Kill! The newly appointed leader charged forward, bringing frantic orders with him. The ringwraiths did not simply stand and watch. Launch a general assault, one suggested. The sooner it was done, the sooner they could leave. The others agreed. The quietest ringwraith stepped forward, raised his head to the sky, and lifted his hand. A ring glittered on it, the only ringwraith present to wear one. Boom! Thunder rolled, starlight thinned, and a dark cloud seemed to be drawn across the land, swallowing light. Darkness spread like a curtain. Everything outside the city walls, except for Riverside Stronghold, vanished into shadow. Only faint, shifting silhouettes hinted at movement beyond. The defenders on the walls clutched their bows, blind to where to aim, unable to tell whether an assault was coming. Inside the city, lanterns and torches guttered, their light failing to reach as far as before. The three ringwraiths themselves glowed with a sickly green light, like three rising emerald suns. Panic spread like a fever. Amid the drowning darkness and eerie green luminescence, a bright, fiery red flare suddenly blossomed. Do not be afraid. Their power hasn't grown. It's all illusion. Gandalf's staff flashed, its clear light cutting back patches of the dark and revealing the siege towers already in place. Thump! Orcs swarmed up the ladders like crawling insects. The city's defenders met them, blades clashing in the gloom. Counterattack! Counterattack! Gandalf ran along the wall, staff raised, chasing away pockets of shadow. Balin kicked an orc down and grunted, They have so many tricks. If this were any other hold, it would have gone long ago. Luckily, when our main enemies came from the Misty Mountains, the ringwraiths did not take part, another soldier said. Of course not, Balin muttered. Gandalf shoved another orc off the battlement with the butt of his staff. Be grateful to Elrond and Lady Galadriel, and Saruman, for that matter. They drove the ringwraiths away before. That's what kept this from happening before. This is the first I've heard of that, Balin said. Whether you've heard of it or not, this ends now. Leave their dark magics to me, Gandalf told Fallodon across the wall. Wait for my signal and be ready to lead the counterattack. All right, Fallodon replied. At that moment, a single white firework burst on the northern horizon, a flare of light that revealed a figure standing on a high ridge. He drew a longsword that shone with brilliant blue light and pointed it toward the battlefield. Behind him flowed an endless line of silver-armored cavalry. The flash died and darkness rushed back, but the panic in the defenders' hearts had been burned away. The bonfire of hope had been lit. Oh! The soldiers steadied. Strength returned to them, as if it had been waiting all this time. The orcs, the swarming attackers, even the three terrifying ringwraiths no longer seemed invincible. The shadow over the sky cracked under the force of their renewed courage. Fallodon glanced at Gandalf and praised, Your signal really works. Gandalf, staff still in hand, looked as surprised as everyone. That wasn't me. From the north came a rolling thunder of hooves. The orcs, who had so recently been hunting with the darkness on their side, now found themselves in the blind. Charge! A brilliant blue sword led the way, and behind it, the silver-armored cavalry poured forward like a river unleashed. Spears and lances glittered as they leveled at the dense ranks of the Aoki army. Dozens upon dozens of armored warhorses thundered along, armored to the teeth and galloping at full speed, over 70 kilometers per hour, a steel tide driving into the night. Charge into the darkness! Charge into despair! The riders cried. Kill! Answered the defenders, and the ground shook as two forces met in a thunder of steel and fury. Chapter 253. Victory. What is despair? Is it the all-encompassing blackness, the choking screams, the endless enemy pressing in from every side, or the light being swallowed whole? Any of those can inspire fear, but they do not alone explain despair. People still have the strength to fight, and even if the light vanished, defeat would not be inevitable. At that moment, the ones in despair were the orcs attacking outside the city. Over the open plain, cavalry had met infantry in a surprise charge. In the dark, a silver torrent of riders cut straight through the tens of thousands of the OK army, trampling screams under the thunder of hooves. The three eerie green glows, those unmistakable black shapes, pulled back to avoid being swept by the onrush. But sometimes retreat only delays the inevitable. "Bard, regroup and charge again," someone barked. A figure at the front broke from the formation and raced straight at the three black shadows, showing himself to draw their attention. That kind of boldness can break an enemy, but it can also draw a worse doom onto oneself. The three ringwraiths sprang onto their terrible skeletal mounts and without hesitation chose to fall back, keeping as far as possible from the man hunting them. The decision was made. There was no point in risking everything. "Regroup," the cavalry commander called. The riders wheeled, arrayed quickly, and aimed again. Bard scanned the field, eyes sharp despite the dark. Even his famed vision made out only silhouettes, but the standard armor of their territory, the bright trim, caught enough light to be seen. If not for that, falling in this blackness might have been a mercy. "Charge!" he roared. The second wave slammed into the center. The orcs were still stunned. No orders came from their ranks. The first sudden strike had torn their lines apart. No time to turn, no time to form counters. In an instant, the OK army began to disintegrate. With cavalry reforming for another impact, it looked like the orcs might yet blunt the blow, if only they could organize. But the ringwraiths were being hunted, and their commander, newly appointed, was as bewildered as the rest, panic filling his chest. "Charge!" the cavalry shouted again, and the torrent swallowed the enemy. The orc chieftain finally remembered one of the few commands he knew: counterattack. But it was useless. The army could not be reformed. Only a handful of ogres with hide like iron could stand and slow a charging horse long enough to flip rider and mount. A few giant beasts remained as well, but most had been lost in the siege and offered no decisive threat. Bard saw several riders thrown, tumbling from horses, about to be trampled. He spurred forward, raised his razor spear, and charged a giant beast. The creature raised an arm thicker than a tree to crush him. At the clash, Bard drew breath and hurled his spear. Cold light traced the shaft. It flew dozens of meters and buried itself in the beast's chest. Bard flattened himself on his mount as the great arm whistled past, catching the wind and whipping his hair. The beast staggered and fell with a groan, a mortal blow. "Well done," followed uncalled from the wall, clapping. "His aim has always been excellent," Gandalf said. "You know him?" Followed asked sharply. "Of course I know him. That is Bard, administrator of the River Valley. I'm surprised you don't," Gandalf replied. "I was stargazing the last time," Followden muttered. "Gentlemen," Balin cut in, "enough talk. Shouldn't we be out helping?" "You're right," Followden said. Boom! The stones blocking the gate exploded outward, and soldiers poured out. Their roar was intoxicating. Seeing their lord returned, and the cavalry's charge had loosened something in them. The people of Roadside Fort had never been known for passive defense. They surged forward to prove it. "Back here, you lot!" someone shouted, and a soft firework pop rang above the melee as Li Wei unfolded his elytra and dived in, intercepting the ringwraiths. He landed, switching immediately into his netherite alloy armor to guard against surprises. The three jet-black horses reared, instinctively afraid of the man who confronted them. Li Wei pointed his sword and called, "Who goes first? All together." There was no escape. The ringwraiths shared a cold glance. If they died, so be it. The mission would still be complete. They dismounted and drew their poisoned blades. "All at once, then," one breathed. A chorus of shrieks cut the air. Li Wei's rune shield sparked and flared, taking the blows, but he still felt the sting of poison. There was no time for sweets or milk. The three enemies closed from different angles. Two activated their ethereal forms, trying to bypass armor and strike flesh. The third, the ringwraith wearing the ring, did not. He knew magical strikes meant nothing against Li Wei's rune shield. Li Wei swung his sword. The ringed one dodged, producing an axe hammer to force a clash and buy his allies a chance. Li Wei seemed to commit to the duel, drawing the other two in, but at the last second he shifted, plucking a shield from his inventory. The shield slammed into readiness and went on cooldown. The axe-wielder's combo broke as his strike rebounded. His hands stung and faltered. In that split second, Li Wei recovered his longsword and lunged. Flames erupted. One ringwraith screamed and fell, burning. Before Li Wei could finish the others, a cry split the sky. A great eagle descended, bearing a golden figure on horseback. He landed on the high ridge Li Wei had stood on moments before and called down, "Ally, I have come to aid you." Then he charged, sword blazing. Wherever he strode, light pushed back the dark clouds and the weavings of shadow. Li Wei watched as the figure seemed to grow taller, more luminous. The ringwraiths recoiled and tried to melt into darkness. The newcomer would not allow it. "Who gave you the courage to be distracted when facing me?" the stranger demanded, and his blade found a flank. Where mortals make deadly mistakes against ringwraiths, the reverse was true here. One solid blow from the luminous warrior sent the wraiths into flame and limp ruin. By the time he drew near, the three enemies were nothing but charred, broken armor on the ground. "Did I get here in time?" he asked. "Just in time," Li Wei said, facing the golden-haired elf who still shimmered faintly. "Glorfindel, how did you follow me?" This was Glorfindel, elf lord of ancient legend, bathed in the light of the two trees and returned to Middle-earth long ago. In raw power he could match a Balrog, yet here, at this moment, his prowess complemented Li Wei's. As the elf crossed the field, the dark clouds thinned, and under the newly revealed stars and moon, the warrior's eyes cleared. Killing orcs became easier. The soldiers fought freer. "And the great eagles?" Li Wei asked. "When did they arrive?" "Right behind you," Glorfindel answered. "The great eagles came shortly after you left with the soldiers. They brought news." Glorfindel dismounted and studied Li Wei. "But you ran so fast I could only chase from behind. Not all horses are built for that speed." Li Wei could only think that the full-speed mounts of Roadside Fort even bested the Rivendell steeds. He pressed on to the point. "News," he said, "elaborate. Let's rewind a bit." Before the war broke out, when Li Wei had just passed halfway town and was skirting the western side of the Misty Mountains, the forest began to stir. Ogres, driven out of their woods by some unseen force, were roaming the outskirts. Li Wei could not simply ignore them. At the Sky Road entrance to the last bridge, he led his men off the main road to clear the threat. While they were fighting, Glorfindel arrived with a squadron of Rivendell cavalry. A brilliant, blade-bright light flashed in the air. An elven sword, forged in an older age, sliced through skin tougher than stone as if it were paper. Wielded with uncanny force, the blow nearly split an ogre in two at the waist. The monster collapsed with a crash, and the elf who had swung the sword stepped forward, hair and armor immaculate in the dust. "I didn't expect it would be you," Glorfindel said. Li Wei gave the fallen ogre a kick, but it didn't stir. He had to walk around it. Border scouts sent word that the troll forest was acting strange. Lord Elrond sent me to investigate and to support allies. Glorfindel explained the situation in the strip of land between the troll forest and the last bridge. "But it seems you've already taken care of things." "Elrond was overly worried," Li Wei replied. Glorfindel shook his head. With Li Wei present, these ogres could do little. He trusted Li Wei completely. "Rivendell had sent me on goodwill. Report back to Elrond when you can." "Watch this first," Li Wei said. A commotion rose behind them. "1, 2, pull! Ha!" Nearby, a group of armored soldiers had lashed ropes around a massive ogre in a crude siege technique. They held it to prevent a charge, but the creature was so tough they were struggling. The ogre roared, pulling so hard it nearly dragged the men off their feet. Swords ringing against thick hide sounded like picks against rock. Some blades bounced harmlessly off. Ordinary weapons did little against such beasts. Only great strength or special traits could wound them. Li Wei sighed. "I'll take care of the rest." "I'll come," Glorfindel said. They rushed forward together. The soldiers quickly released the ropes and stepped aside. Freed, the ogre reared and was about to lunge when it saw two small figures charging at it. It slammed down with the force of a collapsing boulder. Li Wei raised an empty hand and held the blow without flinching. An amber glow, his rune shield, flared and took the impact. A golden flash followed, and Glorfindel's sword found its mark, cutting the ogre to its knees. Li Wei drew his own blade. In the next instant, two streaks of swordlight tore past the ogre from opposite sides, circled, and met to bisect the monster cleanly at the waist. It fell, split in two. The remaining ogres took two cautious steps back. One of them stared at Li Wei for a long moment, then suddenly pointed and shouted, "It's the wealth-swallowing ghost! The wealth-swallowing ghost!" Panic broke. It bolted for the forest, then, as if remembering where home lay, swerved north toward the Etten Moors. But it could not outrun the two who followed. Glorfindel leapt and landed on the fleeing ogre, driving his blade down and killing it instantly. He landed lightly. Not a hair on him was out of place. The surrounding soldiers exchanged whispers, awed by the elf's speed and grace. Who's stronger, the Lord or him? Someone wondered. Glorfindel glanced over and saw Li Wei already engaged with two more ogres. "What's this? I've done twice as many as you," the elf teased. Li Wei turned, wearing his habitual serious expression. Glorfindel smiled faintly, almost helplessly. "Nothing. I just meant we should hurry. Some ogres are fleeing north." "All right, let's see who gets more," Li Wei said. He vaulted onto his horse and charged into the fleeing horde. After a moment, Glorfindel called out a number. 9. Li Wei's expression tightened. He opened his elytra and shot north, returning moments later. "Funny coincidence. I just took one more than you." "You win," Glorfindel conceded, blinking but saying no more. The soldiers cheered at the friendly rivalry. The elves remained composed. Strictly speaking, the ogre that had been bisected earlier should have meant half a point each, but such details were soon forgotten. The skirmish had ended. Under Li Wei's direction, the force changed course. They would not continue along the Sky Road, but would march straight south toward Riverside Stronghold, across easier plains. Glorfindel and his cavalry, after tidying the battlefield, prepared to head east back to Rivendell. As they finished, a piercing cry from the sky drew every eye. A great eagle circled down, scattering dust with its descent. Glorfindel stepped forward and hailed it. "Messenger of the King of Arda, what news do you bring?" The eagle bore tidings from the east of the Misty Mountains. Bad news that sharpened Glorfindel's features. "There's still time. I'll go chase Li Wei," he said. Understanding the gravity of the message, Glorfindel vaulted onto his mount and spurred south. He frowned at the pace. Roadside fort horses were of legendary caliber, faster than most horses of Middle-earth, and felt a moment of embarrassment. The great eagle swooped overhead, keeping pace as Glorfindel raced after Li Wei. Chapter 255, The Other Side. There's still time. Inside the Hall of Erebor, Legolas said it with quiet insistence. Thorin answered differently. "Li Wei has been gone a long time. The battle over there needs support. How can there possibly be time?" "Don't worry, Legolas, son of Thranduil. The dwarves of Erebor will hold this land. Let anyone who dares try to take it know there is no one here to be trifled with." "You may have courage," Orifer said suddenly, "but the army of dark men in Uruk is no weak thing. From what I hear, their numbers are substantial, tens of thousands at least," Legolas added. "Put aside the source of your information for now," Thorin replied. "You should know there are not only Erebor dwarves here, but garrisons from Dale, Long Lake, and Grand Road Town as well. Even if the main forces have moved west of the mountains, these soldiers are no small matter." Thorin spread his arms and looked toward the gate. "Do you think that without Li Wei, the people here amount to nothing? Then you underestimate them, and you underestimate Li Wei. This is his territory." "I agree," Legolas said, nodding. "And the Black Forest is nearby. The Woodland Realm won't simply stand idly by." Thorin gave a curt look. "I'll reserve judgment on that." Could Thranduil and his folk actually move? Although Erebor and the Woodland Realm had reconciled, their contact since had been sparse. Prejudice doesn't vanish overnight. Neither side truly knew where the other stood. Orifer, calm as ever, suggested, "Can't you send someone to speak with the Woodland Realm?" "I won't." Thorin's reply rang so loud the hall seemed to echo. The thought of Thranduil sending aid with slim condescension made Thorin's teeth ache. He could almost hear the Elf King saying their help was a charitable token rather than solidarity. He would rather handle this himself. "I'll go," Legolas offered. I'll inform them, and I can let Leeway know immediately. His allies are not only us. Then that's up to you, Thorin said, and Legolas left. When Legolas had gone and the necessary messages had been sent, Orifer rose as well. Thorin stopped him, however. There was something he wanted to settle. Who are you? Thorin asked. I introduced myself before. Orifer, a vineyard owner from Dorwinion, a friend of Leeway, Orifer replied in his usual steady voice. Are you sure? Thorin pressed. You can be a vineyard owner who has led a peaceful life for 2 eras, tending grapes and making wine. But you might also be something else you didn't say. A lord of Dorwinion or a former king, perhaps. Orifer blinked, a hint of curiosity crossing his features as if he hadn't expected such bluntness. I don't quite understand. Thorin's eyes narrowed. You might fool young, naive elves, or a lord who spends his life on adventures, but some things can't be disguised. That aura, the bearing of someone who has sat upon a throne, it cannot be hidden. Legolas and Leeway, neither suspicious by nature, would have been content with the simple explanation. To them, titles were meaningless. To Thorin, who dealt daily with rulers and realms, such subtleties were impossible to miss. He had a craftsman's sensitivity for rank and bearing. It doesn't matter, Thorin said more mildly, relieved at least to confirm Orifer was no enemy. Of course we are not, Orifer replied. The two, dwarf and elf, stood and shook hands. I hope your stay here will be pleasant. Erebor's market is lively. Perhaps you'll find something to interest you. Thank you. I will take a look. Outside Erebor, the horses' hooves clattered as Legolas raced toward the exit of the Sky Road. He arrived at the Woodland Realms outpost at 8th Quarter Town and, ready to dismount, caught a movement in the trees. The Woodland army had already gone out. They had received the word. Legolas breathed a small sigh of relief and continued west to Carltown, where the Beowen clan lived. Leeway had prepared a special place for the great eagles there, a colossal ancient tree with a broad, sturdy crown and a comfortable nest high above. A great eagle was resting in that nest. Legolas called, and the eagle heard. Glorfindel relayed the message with his clear, steady voice. So that's how it is, Glorfindel reported, and Leeway understood at once. Thank you, Leeway said, waving. The great eagle answered with a piercing cry. What will you do now? Go back? Glorfindel asked. It will be far for the soldiers, Leeway said, but not for me. Glorfindel only agreed. True enough. He is often out of sight, one moment in the west, the next in the east, moving even faster than our great eagles. A familiar warm voice came from nearby. Gandalf had ridden over. After dismounting, he greeted the small company briefly. Everything here is in hand. Do as you must, Leeway, he said, looking toward the fiery red sun climbing in the east. It's over. On the other side of the mountains, thunder rolled. It has begun. Beyond the high walls of Dale, ranks of black-armored troops intertwined with men in gold armor. The black-clad fighters were shorter but fierce, wild and relentless. The gold-armored forces were taller and more disciplined, imposing but dangerous in their own steadiness. Behind them, massive siege towers were being pushed forward by Olog, and catapults lurched into position. They're here, someone muttered. Upon the city wall, Thorin stood in full armor among dwarves and human defenders. He was the highest commander present. He scanned the lines below and grunted. Those elves really didn't come. Resigned to the forces at hand, Thorin signaled to the men behind him. Prepare the heavy crossbows, let them taste our power. On the battlefield outside Riverside Stronghold, the outcome had already been decided. Leeway had returned with thousands of cavalry, the ringwraiths had been slain, and by sunrise the orcs were wiped out. All that remained was the grim work of tending the injured and clearing the dead. Quick, carry the wounded back, someone shouted. Potions for the worst first. Don't give up on him. That one's waist looks half crushed. Set him straight and give him a potion. Hold on, keep breathing. The ground bore the scars of the night's fighting. The defenders of Riverside Stronghold, reinforced by Leeway's cavalry, had taken terrible losses. Everyone had fought as if their lives depended on it. When the dust settled, nearly every survivor was hurt, often gravely. The staunch defenders had bled almost as much as the orcs. As dawn lightened the plain, a soldier collapsed, clutching his waist. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth and mixed with his tears, the crimson and salt glittering in the pale light. What's wrong with you? A ranger demanded. kneeling to support the man's head, his voice tense. "Child, breathe. Don't move. Don't pull at the wound. Remember what I taught you." "No, instructor. I have to say it now, before it's too late," the soldier gasped, grabbing the ranger's sleeve, eyes pleading. He forced out the words, each one a struggle. "The healing potion. Tastes so good." The ranger's face froze. He yanked open the man's armor, and to his astonishment, the wound beneath was already closed. He shoved the soldier away. The man hit the earth, and, stirred by indignation more than pain, the ranger gave him a sharp kick in the backside. The wounded man yelped and scrambled to his feet. To rouse a ranger of nearly 200 years to such a degree of outrage said more about the soldiers than the ranger. These men had learned to fight like Li Wei's troops, easy to injure, painfully fragile, and almost impossible to finish. They broke and bled, then somehow kept standing. A great eagle rose into the sky, bearing a figure in black plate. Li Wei rode away on its back. The clearing of the battlefield was left to the commanding officers and the wizard who remained. "Now that he's gone, there's no need to worry about over there," Gandalf said, drawing Balin's attention back. "We must continue our journey. Bilbo will want to hear new tales." "Agreed." Balin sat, his grizzled beard matted with blood, some orc, some his own. He ran a hand over it and realized a neat patch was missing on the right side, stubbly and pricked where beard had been cut close. He closed his eyes and winced. "Don't worry, old friend, it'll grow back," Gandalf said. Balin scoffed. "You say that to those lads 100 years younger than me. At my age, beard growth is slow." Gandalf shrugged and smoothed his own great gray beard. It could have been worse. Glorfindel returned with the Rivendell cavalry soon after. Li Wei's great eagle carried him swiftly back to Roadside Fort. Through Hellgate he went and on toward River Valley City. From the city walls, the dwarves manned massive crossbows and rained bolts down on the Ologs. The beasts' armor was thick, comparable to a man in diamond plate without enchantment, and their bulk gave them natural resistance. Even the heavy crossbows needed concentrated volleys to fell a single Olog. Still, the dwarves' disciplined fire and the 1,000 iron golems housed within the walls gave the defenders a grim advantage. Those golems were the last line of defense, a living bastion that would make any attacker despair. "How's it going?" a voice asked at Li Wei's shoulder. Thorin turned. "Very well, we can hold. Those siege towers can't even get near the walls." Li Wei blinked. He hadn't noticed the prince arrive. "Li Wei, when did you get here?" Thorin asked. "Just now. I heard there was fighting." Thorin nodded. The speed of Li Wei's movement was odd, but not impossible. "What's the situation elsewhere?" "Stable. Same as here. We've had no real losses," Li Wei said, scanning the field below as he spoke. "At first I thought this was a feint." "A feint to the west while they strike the east?" Thorin asked. Li Wei shrugged. "Don't get hung up on directions. Look at intent, not geography. Initially I thought Riverside Stronghold was the diversion, and this was the true blow. But after seeing their forces, I changed my mind." "So what do you think now?" Li Wei hesitated. "I don't know. If I had to name it, I'd call it probing. Clumsy probing. Sauron doesn't waste so much unless he has a reason. If this is all there is, he's sending men to bleed for nothing." Thorin frowned. The army attacking River Valley City was only a fraction of the force that had struck Riverside Stronghold. Most were Uruks, with equipment that looked similar to the units that had retreated from Gondor's gates. A handful were human warriors from the east. Nothing remarkable. The composition was odd. "It's been going on a long time," Thorin said, "and we haven't taken losses while they keep diminishing. If this is all they have, we'd have been safe even if you hadn't returned." "Maybe both our positions are the west," Li Wei suggested. "Maybe their true target is further east." Thorin had been adopting some of Li Wei's phrasing lately. "Could be," he said slowly. "What about other places? Any word from the Eagles?" Li Wei had already asked. They scouted far and wide. Besides Riverside Stronghold and River Valley City, an army was sent toward Long Lake Town, but the elves intercepted them. "The elves are fighting alongside Long Lake's sailors now. There are no other significant movements." Thorin considered this. "I'd thought the elves weren't doing much." "You should trust your allies more," Li Wei said. "I trust them, as I trust you." Thorin lowered his head, thinking. The elves' reputation in dwarven circles had improved a touch of late, and he found himself more inclined to believe them. "It's time to end this," Li Wei said. He drew his sword and walked to the city gate. The gate swung open. Down below, the Uruk's eyes had flashed with excitement at the sight of an opening. That excitement, when they saw who came out, died and was replaced by fear. Chapter 57, New Mission. Roar! The Olog's bellow split the air, but it could not stop what was coming. Black ichor spurted from its throat as its body erupted in flames. The other Uruks fell back at the sight. One by one, the giant beasts collapsed. The siege towers crumpled, and the army's deadliest weapons were destroyed. This force no longer posed a threat to River Valley City. The battle was decided. At the edge of the field, the Uruk leader who had been leading the assault froze, breath hitching as the truth hit him. Then his eyes cleared. "It's that lord," he shouted as if waking from a trance, but the Uruks around him only pressed the attack as if they hadn't heard. "Damn you, are you mad?" he barked. "I am your leader. I order a retreat." Nobody obeyed. "Are you all deaf?" he screamed, grabbing at one of his men and peering into his face. The Uruk's eyes were blood red and vacant, devoid of reason. The rest of his troops, and even the Easterlings, looked the same. Something was wrong. Memories scrambled through his head. The last clear image he could recall was in Minas Morgul, the Witch King seizing him in the Tower of Sorcery, the helmet's voice a cold rasp. "You, and all the cowardly scum under you who have betrayed your master, should die." The memory cut off there. He had been arrogant, trusted the Witch King, kept secrets, thought himself untouchable. Now he stood on a battlefield he no longer understood. A chill ran down his spine. Sweat poured from him. "I did not betray my master," he cried, but no one listened. A trumpet sounded from the south. He looked up to see a great host of elves, their armor flashing with gold, advancing. The army from the Black Forest had arrived, some riders still stained with blood. River Valley City's horns answered, and the dwarves poured out in force. Elves, dwarves, and men were joined now, and together they were overwhelming. Was this necessary? He thought helplessly. Even without the allied armies, that lord tearing across the front could, given time, have crushed them all by himself. Panic drove him to the rear. He shoved his men and the small handful of Easterlings he still commanded ahead of him and began to retreat. Behind him, the nether ward of the battlefield was a cacophony of slaughter as the allied forces, under that lord's brutal leadership, swept everything that resisted out of their path. Then an arrow, fired from an unseen archer, whistled in and lodged in the Uruk leader's foot. "Damn!" he snarled. Wounded and desperate, he leapt into the river. Water surged over him, swallowing the sounds of battle. He swam with everything he had, teeth bared, driven by a single, raw instinct. "I will not die," he told himself. "I must survive." By dawn, the crisis in the towns along the river had been resolved. An almost perfect victory, someone observed as survivors gathered. "Ally, did I arrive in time?" Thranduil asked calmly as he dismounted his elk and approached Li Wei. "Just in time," Li Wei said. The elves were all the same in their ease. Thorin, keeping his usual stern facade, managed after a moment under Thranduil's gaze to add, "Well done." Warriors poured out of the city to clear the field. Inside the walls, a figure slipped toward the stables but was quickly spotted. "Orifer," Li Wei called, waving. Orifer stiffened, tried to play it off and keep walking. "I see you. Where are you going?" Li Wei shouted, forcing him to turn. "Long time," Orifer said. "It's been a long time," Li Wei agreed. "I heard you warned us of the enemy's arrival. Thank you." "It was nothing. Don't mention it," Orifer replied with a dismissive wave. Thranduil had followed them over, and now paused, studying Orifer's face. "You two know each other?" Li Wei asked, noticing their small exchanges. "We met a few times long ago," Thranduil said. "Long ago for an elf, being 1,000 years is barely a visit." "The last time was over 1,000 years," Orifer conceded. Thranduil glanced between them and then offered a pragmatic explanation. "He's a business partner. Dorwinian's wine has been reliable for ages." "Very well," Li Wei said. Seeing they did not want to speak further, he let the matter drop. As he moved away, the two elves resumed their conversation. "I represent no power here, only myself," Orifer said quietly. "Dorwinian remains neutral. Please do not announce my presence." "Understood," Thranduil replied without hesitation. With that assurance, Orifer relaxed and continued. "Personally, I would be glad of a friendship with such a powerful ally. It is only, he is human. No matter how strong, a human's time is finite. Even the Dunedain live only a few hundred years. Great kingdoms rise and fall. Our way, non-contention, lets small things endure when empires pass away. If he were only human, Thranduil said, a wry lift to his lips, you would not have come here in person. Think on that. The words hung in the air. Thranduil turned, and with his troops, melted back into the forest. Orifer watched until the king vanished, then went to the stables and led out a well-rested horse. You've had a hard road, he murmured, stroking the animal's neck. Far away, in the black expanse of Mordor's dark tower, 3 suits of black armor, wrought by Sauron's own hand, moved as if flesh filled them. The ringwraiths had regained their bodies. The mission is complete, one said. All who did not belong to the Master, and all who betrayed him, are dead, another added. What needed investigation has been investigated. The seeds we were to plant have been set, the third reported. As they prepared to return to their posts, another ringwraith appeared and blocked their way. The Master has new orders, he intoned. Prepare yourselves. The 3 exchanged looks and fell into step behind him. There was more to be done. A sudden upheaval had ended as abruptly as it had begun. The assault on a newly founded city in the Free City States lasted only a few days. Though its scale was second only to the 5 armies battle of the last century, the campaign merited only a brief mention in the histories. In 2949, Riverside Stronghold was founded. 3 ringwraiths led 15,000 orcs and dozens of ogres against it. 5,000 defenders held the walls through the night. At dawn, the Lord returned with 6,000 cavalry and shattered the orc host. A grey wizard and an Erebor dwarf fought in the defense. Rivendell sent troops to stop the ogres and dispatched the light elf Glorfindel to reinforce the stronghold. On the same day, River Valley, Long Lake Town, and Great Road Town were attacked. The Erebor dwarves raised their whole army to aid River Valley. The Woodland Realm sent a large force to purge Long Lake and Great Road Town of invaders. Midway, the Lord himself arrived and led a charge that routed the enemy and won a great victory. The historian paused, then set down a detailed account. The movements of small detachments, the strategy of the supreme commander, the bloody minutiae of the field. He named the deeds of important participants. Gandalf running up and down the battlements, kindling hope with his fire, Balin charging at the ringwraiths, Glorfindel appearing, radiant with golden light. After the fighting, the Lord returned to his territory and remained at home for some time. The common folk, used to only hearing of their Lord in legends and rumor, found his constant presence strangely unfamiliar. To your commoners, Gandalf would later tell Leeway, most of the time, you exist only in stories and the words of others, a phantom they can sense but not touch. Now that you are seen every day, their sense of reality and of myth will take a while to line up. 3 months after the war, Gandalf and Leeway walked side by side along the lake, heading slowly toward the most conspicuous structure in the territory, the Nameless Tower. Gandalf lit his pipe, and as was common for a wizard advising a lord, pointed out some of the peculiarities he had observed in Leeway's realm. Now that you have come back and are seen daily, he said, many people's perception of what is real and what is legend will be a little off for a while. People's memories aren't long, Leeway said. They'll adapt. Probably, Gandalf agreed. Leeway stretched and luxuriated in the ease of these quiet days. My tower is really tall, Balin's voice exclaimed ahead. The dwarf had been standing at the entrance for some time, gazing up. Gandalf and Leeway looked up as well. Clouds drifted past the tower's top. It is taller than any tower I've seen in Middle-earth, Gandalf said. This tower took a lot of work, especially the interior layout and room designs, Leeway replied. He had planned every detail and remembered the slow, intermittent years of construction. If he had devoted himself solely to building, it would have gone much faster, but procrastination and other duties had stretched the work out. They entered together. The tower's interior had changed dramatically since its first incarnation. Dangerous and secret facilities, enchanted altars and the like, had been moved to higher floors. The lower levels had been arranged as a grand library, a vast archive of books gathered from every direction. Curators sorted and shelved them. Attendants cleaned and tended the rooms. The place smelled of paper and oil and old wood. Gandalf immediately put out his pipe and slipped through a side door. He stopped in the doorway, mouth slightly open. Above him, there were nothing but books, endless shelves and interconnected staircases rising and falling in a labyrinth of knowledge. Thoughtful signboards hung over the staircases to direct readers to particular categories. "This is a marvel," Gandalf murmured. Balin walked among the stacks, looking at everything with an expression of pure joy. The scale of the architecture pleased him as a dwarf. As a scholar and Erebor strategist, the books thrilled him. "I didn't tell Bilbo about this," he said. "When I visited him, I had no idea what it would be like inside." "If Bilbo knew, he'd be glad to give us his own books," Li Wei said. "Books?" Li Wei raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Bilbo says he plans to write a book, though he hasn't even picked a title yet. He'll start with more thought." "I'll look forward to it," Balin said. Gandalf's eyes then caught on a relatively new volume displayed on a separate counter. He picked it up. The title read, "A History of Roadside Fort." The spine and margins showed signs of recent handling. Notes and additions had been made. "That one's still being serialized," Li Wei said when Gandalf showed interest. "It's being written and revised by the historian of Roadside Fort." Gandalf flipped it open. "In the Third Age, 2940, Roadside Fort was founded, and then a small miracle occurred." Li Wei, hearing the words, listened as if the historian's tongue had made Li Wei's deeds larger than he recalled. The book told it in simple folk historian terms. Li Wei had walked the land, cut a length from the first oak he found, declared that piece a unit called 1 gi, and thus a new measure came into being. Later he converted it to 1 meter and subdivided it into centimeters and millimeters. "Is that how it went?" Gandalf asked, looking up. "You could say so," Li Wei said quietly. "The common folk still say G in speech. Meter shows up in formal records." "A decimal-based system is sensible," Gandalf approved, flipping pages. The most recent entry in the volume was the Great Battle 3 months past. "A valiant Erebor dwarf," he read aloud. "Is that referring to me?" Balin's grin split his face at the praise. Gandalf left the book for a moment and glanced toward the stairwell that led to the higher levels. "What about those upper floors?" "Those are secrets," Li Wei said. "They're for my research." "Research?" Li Wei rolled a runic ring on his finger and met Gandalf's eyes. "Yes, research." Gandalf noticed the 2 gold rings inlaid with amber on Li Wei's hand and studied them for a long moment. "I hope it's nothing dangerous." "It's not," Li Wei said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Very safe." "Quite safe," Gandalf echoed, but he did not seem entirely convinced as they walked deeper into the stacks, the tower's books whispering around them like a very learned wind. Chapter 259, The Crippled Freak. Gandalf and Balin left together and returned to Erebor, the starting point of their journey. After arriving with Balin, Gandalf set off again at once, bound for some unknown destination. Balin remained. "It was a good trip, wasn't it?" he told his old friends in Erebor. He recounted the giant bear staring up at the moon on Carl Rock, the vistas along the Sky Road, the battle at the Riverside Stronghold, and Bilbo's recent predicament. When he finished, his friends told him of the fighting in Dale, but compared to Riverside Stronghold, that seemed the lesser tale. "That was much more exciting," Balin said. Some of the dwarves pictured Balin's scenes as he spoke. When one scoffed, "What's the fuss? We've done fine without going anywhere," it was plain envy talking. Thorin, proud for his friend and his most capable lieutenant, listened with genuine pleasure. He only spared Balin a teasing question. "Balin, why is one part of your beard so pointed?" Balin's smile froze. "That's from the ringwraiths, Thorin. Don't ask about it, and don't you laugh. He nearly cut my throat with that cursed blade. My beard saved me. Best beard there is." "Oh yes, the best beard," another added, and the jibe nearly made Balin's temper flare. Thorin waved his hand to quiet the squabbling. "Enough, let's be serious. Those working in the deepest parts of the mountain have been feeling short of breath, gloom and unease as soon as they go down," someone reported. "Are we digging too deep?" another asked. "We've dug deeper before without this." "Is it the heat?" another wondered. "That's unlikely. Think, many of us work beside iron for years, near great furnaces. Did any of us feel sick from that?" "No. Dwarves are stubborn as stone, hardy and resilient. They rarely fall ill. There are hardly any records of sickness among them." "Maybe it's the climate," someone offered. We could improve the work conditions, supplies, send down ice and cold ale. That might help. The discussion moved through practical options, and soon the old jokes and gossip were forgotten. All seemed well enough in the mountain. Meanwhile, at the riverside stronghold, Li Wei had settled into a long-term presence after returning to his lands. He joined the civilian building crews and took charge of much of the new construction: walls, houses, shipyards, docks. Progress went forward steadily. Supplies, manpower, and know-how were plentiful. Where the terrain was difficult and transforming it would normally be hard, even with the territory's resources, Li Wei simply took the lead. He became the chief foreman, filling the role of several crews. He worked from dawn to dark without pause until the work was done. The people watching him felt a pang of worry, jealousy, awe, and concern all at once. Many could not sleep easy seeing their lord labor nonstop. "You should rest," a representative said finally, out of true concern. "Rest?" Li Wei blinked. "Am I not resting now?" As he spoke, he set another block in place. That night, the representative lay awake, thinking. In most lands, no one was forced to do anything. Choice was the rule. Yet Li Wei's zeal was contagious. "The fire in my heart has been lit," he told himself, and rose, lit a lamp, and went back to work. In the bustle of the shipyard, every day brought something new: building, crafting ships, supervising work, and even the occasional visit to the west gate of Moria. Since the Great War, the approach to Moria had grown quiet. Almost all the orcs within had been slaughtered. The tunneling worms had burrowed deeper than where the dwarves once sought the Balrog and vanished from sight, leaving only strange hollows. When work allowed and there were no pressing decisions, Li Wei would walk through the gate from west to east unbothered. No orcs, no sign of the Balrog. Perhaps it's safe, he thought, and walked the route again, leaving markers to guide any future travelers. A year passed. The new, massive shipyard was a notable thing. Allies and enemies alike took notice. Even in places usually removed from war, news from Riverside Stronghold became gossip at mealtimes. The year turned quickly, and apart from the shipyard and the tensions it caused, no great events disturbed Middle-earth. There were stirrings, though. Even on the crossroads, where Mordor and Gondor contested ground, new movements were seen among the eastern Uruk bands. "We haven't seen you before, crippled freak," one Uruk sneered inside a camp as a disabled figure approached. The Uruk with the lame leg looked at the newcomers and answered evenly. These were replacements. The previous Uruks here had all been sent to die by their master. "I crawled back from the worst battle there was," he said. "He's a cripple, a deserter," the interrogator jeered. Orcs had no pity for the weak. The strong demeaned them as a matter of course. "You haven't seen the Nether, and yet you mouth off here," the lame Uruk shot back. Furious at the defiance, the questioner raised his blade to strike. The crippled Uruk leapt forward, snapping the weapon from his hand amid the cutting blows. He grappled it away, letting his body take the wounds, then swung the blade with brutal skill until the other Uruk was a broken heap and his armor bent. "Who else dares?" he roared, raising his bloodied cleaver. The surrounding Uruks fell back, startled, none daring to step forward. From that day, a notorious monster began to stalk the new Uruk bands sent by Mordor. Though crippled, he was brutal, fierce, and startlingly skilled. Many swore to follow him. He replaced his arrow-pierced leg with a prosthetic and subjected himself to orcish modifications, his skull plated with iron in a grisly ritual that made him howl, but he endured. When the work was done and the prosthetic fitted, his appearance and will had both been remade. They called him the crippled freak, for his mismatched look and his ruined leg. He crushed the nearby bands and became their leader. His fame spread until the Nazgul took notice. "You will serve as leader," they ordered. "Yes, master," he replied. When he strode out of Minas Morgul, he wore a fearsome grin. "My lord, I have returned." And an order went with him. "Withdraw. Do not provoke the monster beneath the crossroads." Chapter 260, Practice. The hard-won kind of peace is the kind people learn to cherish. Those who have seen war and suffering guard every quiet hour jealously. Peace, it becomes the thing you cling to, the thing you assume will last if left alone. It was that assumption that others with darker designs watched and exploited. In the year 2950, a small Mordor squad of orcs, hidden by sorcery, across the Brown Lands and the wilds of the southern Anduin, slipping quietly into the abandoned halls of Moria. Such migrations had become increasingly common. The new arrivals sank into the dark corners, bred and spread. Even the Balrog could not exert command over them. The darkest imprint in their minds was the will of another. Hiss, in a shadowed valley behind a mountain barrier in northern Mordor, something hatched. Its cry unnerved even the most seasoned orc guards. From a steaming pool arose a winged behemoth, its form like a terrible dragon's, and yet not a dragon at all. Scaled and spiked along its spine, its lateral wings were not feathered, but thin membranes stretched between clawed spurs. It was larger than any bird, yet still smaller than the true dragons, bald and brutal, all talons and maw. Not bad. An Uruk shoved aside a trembling orc and stepped forward. This is what Lord Sauron wanted. He inspected the creature with a breeder's eye. When a few drops of its saliva hit the scorched ground, the earth blackened as if the land itself had been burned. Whatever fragile life had remained there withered. The Uruk in charge of the hatchery stared, widening his eyes. It felt purity of malice, he thought, purer and fouler than anything he had known. The memory of Sauron's instructions was enough. Feed it on carrion. Bring the carrion, he ordered the nearest orc. Rotten meat and bones were piled down. At the stench, the beast seemed to awaken fully, like a savage machine flipped to life. It lunged and devoured the putrid offerings with ravenous hunger. Farther south, in Nirn, the dull green half of Mordor, new farms rose out of reclaimed marsh and scrub. Human slaves, handed over by Haradrim traders and southern pirates, tilled the soil. Orc and Uruk populations swelled, behemoths and ogres multiplied. Barad-dûr's repair and expansion moved on to the agenda. Mines and quarries opened across the land. The Far Eastern nations, still reeling from the shadow of war, began to recover slowly. Easterling lords bent the knee and sent tribute and supplies by the shipload. In Umbar, the cult of the Eye drew more recruits, swelling its ranks among the disaffected youth. The Connacht, caught between rising powers, took a more ambivalent posture. Their king continued to send treasures and provisions to Mordor each year, but he often delayed, ignored or openly defied many commands. Sauron, however, paid them little mind. The Connaught was small, not yet worth the attention of a Dark Lord with so many other projects. Rebellion there, even if noisy, would be nothing more than an annoyance. In the end, they would kneel. "Sir, I must remind you, some of the nobles are growing suspicious. You should leave." At a military camp on the Harlan River, a commander bowed politely to a wizard in blue. 3 days. I have matters to investigate. I will go alone after that." "I will cover for you," the commander said. The blue-robed wizard LOTR sighed and looked north. "You have helped me again." By the following year, Barad-dûr rose higher still. Defensive works wrapped its base. Dark roads stitched Mordor together east, west, north, and south. Sauron's old road, abandoned since the Second Age, was rebuilt and trade and troop movements across the land became faster. 3 ringwraiths slipped from the Black Gate and, without fanfare, rode south to Dol Guldur in the southern reaches of the Mirkwood. The fortress, long ravaged by the attacks of elves and a white wizard, lay empty and cursed. Even spiders and beetles would not linger near it. So the Nazgul took it back quietly. The evil dragons of the Black Mountains felt the new presence and moved to the old stronghold as well. Now Sauron no longer hid his existence. He openly set men and orcs to projects across Mordor, yet the reoccupation of Dol Guldur was kept discreet. If word spread that the old fortress had been taken, it would likely draw the attention of certain enemies. The ringwraiths therefore marched with restraint, no drawn blades against passing travelers, no proclamations. In short order, the abandoned fortress was repaired, dark hosts were recalled, and Mordor's power and reach grew. Productivity rose, roads became reliable, Barad-dûr was strengthened, the population swelled, and 2 more territories pledged unshaken loyalty. On the other side of the map, Leeway's Riverbend shipyard announced its completion. Waves slapped the stone quay as ships of every size tied up and trainees, under the watchful eyes of elven instructors, boarded in disciplined lines for their first sea drills. The shipyard's tall tower stood sentinel, its luminescent stone never dimming. A colossal shadow moved across the river, blotting out half the city and swallowing the castle by the shore. Even a 100-meter evil dragon looked small beside it. The vessel, longer than a landworm and larger than any dragon Liwei had seen, was his flagship, the culmination of his planning and craft. Liwei stood at the bow and declared the ship's name to the gathered crew, the Shijian Hao, the practice vessel. Practice is the only test of truth, the purpose of understanding and learning, he told them. Movement follows form, and form follows intent. Our aims have always been high. Now their shape is here. We will move with it.